All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. Thanks for coming to the second meeting of the expert group for the OWASP Top 10 for Large Language Model AI applications. Just dive right in here. I got a few slides to go through, and then we'll open it up for discussion for anybody who has topics. But just a quick review on the aims of the project here. We're really trying to build a community. And I'll talk in a minute about some of the statistics for the community that we're building, but it's pretty awesome. And really create this top 10 list as hopefully one of the foundational works for how to securely and safely use some of these new AI technologies. And ultimately, this will become a living work. There were some questions about this on the Slack channel this past week in terms of, are we going to use a similar methodology to maybe the more mature top 10 lists? And I'll talk a little bit more about the methodology we are using, but we're going to drive pretty aggressively and quickly on this first version because there is so much demand out there and so many questions. And then I expect we'll settle into a cadence more similar to some of the other top 10 lists and start to adopt some of those really good, very data-driven techniques. So this will be a living document, and hopefully this will be a group that'll want to carry that on for quite a while. So quick review of the roadmap. I mentioned earlier, we really have a desire to move quickly, given how fast these large language models have gone from kind of obscure academic pursuits to something that every company in the world is now trying to figure out how to use and integrate into their internal systems or their products. When we launched this a couple of weeks ago, we had our first meeting almost exactly 2 weeks ago at the end of May. I outlined an 8-week roadmap to get us to the first version of the list. And so over the past 2 weeks, we've really been in this phase of brainstorming and providing commentary on the 0.1 list. And again, the 0.1 list was something I put together to incite discussion. I think it's been successful at doing that, but the idea over the next couple of weeks is to really supplant that. That'll just become a historical document about how we got started, and we'll move on to what I'm terming 0.5, which is this sort of midpoint that will be leveraging everything that we've learned over the past 2 weeks and some of the work that we're going to do over the next 2 weeks. Then there will be another opportunity for review. And if you can go on mute, getting a little background noise from some folks. All right, I think we got it. And then really driving towards, by the end of next month, having a 1.0. So any questions about the roadmap before I move on? If you have a question, feel free to just come off mute and go ahead and ask. All right, keep going.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
These milestones look to be synchronized with our calls, but probably we need some interactive brainstorming before these dates.
So let me outline what I'm envisioning going on over the next couple of weeks. And then I'm open to suggestions about additions that we want to make in terms of, say, interactive brainstorming sessions and things like that. So let's note that, and I'll show you what I'm thinking we'll be doing over the next couple of weeks. And just from a process perspective, I'm actually very open to doing things interactively, but we do have a global audience, which makes it challenging to get everyone together. So I'm trying to do as much of this asynchronously and online as we can.
Companies that they support at CRJ has a lot of little companies. So, and they all have many different things that they're involved with.
There we go. All right, so just a few cool facts and figures for everybody. I looked at the Slack channel this morning. We're up to nearly 300 people on the LLM Slack channel on the OWASP workspace. That's up about 2x since 2 weeks ago. So we continue to get people who come in and want to participate in the project, which is awesome. Had over 600 messages posted to the Slack channel by 86 members. So I think between people who've been active on Slack and people who've been active on the wiki, we really have 100 people who are contributing to the discussion on this. And I mean, to be honest, when I started this, I thought maybe there were 10 people in the world who'd be interested in this. So I continue to just be really pleased with how much engagement and interaction that we're getting from everybody. We had so many people interested in adding to the resources page that I ported that over to the wiki. So anybody can add resources there now. I counted them up last night. We have 35 resources between articles, white papers, videos. I think that's becoming a really good resource for people who want to come into this space and get up to speed quickly. You know, whether they're an AI expert learning to learn about security or a security expert trying to learn about large language models, I think there's a lot there that will help people. In terms of what we've done the last 2 weeks, the idea was to pivot around a couple different things. Obviously, we've had a lot of conversation on the Slack channel, but from a more formal perspective, we added 2 pages on the wiki. And I'll show this to everybody in case you haven't participated on that yet. If we go ahead and if you go to the GitHub repository and click on the wiki, there's a couple of pages here. One of them is called the brainstorming area. And really what we did is we seeded this with the 0.1 version of the list and asked people to add commentary. So you'll see people here adding different blocks of commentary to this. And the idea is to get the discussion going in a very direct way around that 0.1 version and what people were thinking about it. So there's a ton of good stuff here. I would encourage everyone, please go review this and see what others are thinking about that initial list. The other thing that we did was, well, what I called the commentary page. And a couple of these things I captured from people put out on the wild before we even got started with the working group at the last meeting. Since then, people have been adding commentary and basically posting these on different forums. Some people created a wiki page here. Other people posted it on their own blogs or their own LinkedIn accounts. Any of that was fine. But now it's linked here. And so if you want to catch up on the commentary kind of across the group in terms of what are people thinking about the list and about the types of vulnerabilities that we're discussing, again, I'd encourage you, go take an hour and review some of the things linked here. I think this is going to give us kind of a durable record of what people have been discussing and what the opinions are on the list. And I think this is a really critical part to getting to the next phase for us. So go back to the slides here. The other thing that we did in terms of trying to align the group as we launched in was we put together 2 documents. One is what I call the charter document, and the other is the mock press release. And, you know, for a group like this, I think it really makes sense to have a charter that outlines what are we trying to accomplish, who's the target audience. I have been a product manager for a long time. And so I've kind of taken that view of it. Who's the audience? What's the job that we're trying to do as a team? The other one is product management technique that I stole from Amazon. It's actually gotten to be pretty standard, which is write your press release before you build the product. And the idea here was to mock up the press release that we would want to put out when we ship the list and use that to focus our efforts to make sure that we build something that kind of meets that and can generate that excitement out there in the world. I put out drafts of these about a week ago. I got a ton of great feedback on them. I put them out as Google Docs. Everybody was able to go in and either make direct wording suggestions or make comments. I went through in the last couple days. I took almost every comment that came in. There were a couple things that I put in notes about that I felt strongly maybe should stay the way that they were. But I think they're to a good point where they can at least continue to guide the discussion. And as such, I took them out of the Google Drive and put them onto the wiki in our area so that everybody can see them. Again, if you haven't reviewed those, go ahead and take a look. I think we'll use that as foundational material to help align our efforts going into the next phase. Any questions here? Let's see, there's one question in the chat. Oh, I see. Hey, David, thanks for posting that. Yep, that's the link.
Good question, Steve. What's the
Yeah.
deadline for posting commentary or the brainstorming? And what's the best way for someone to give? Obviously, we don't want to replicate everywhere. What would be the best place to contribute? Is it the Slack? Is it the brainstorm? Is it the commentary? And is there a deadline for the first response?
Yeah, so the brainstorming phase, going back to the roadmap here, my vision of this is that the brainstorming phase, from a pure brainstorming perspective, is now complete. We got a lot of stuff out there. Please go ahead and review some of what's out there. The Slack channel is always going to be open for people to bring thoughts to. So if you have fresh thoughts, fresh materials, go ahead and put them there. I'm actually going to take that brainstorming area and I'm going to lock that and archive it as the sort of the brainstorming phase. But let me get into what I view as the next phase that we're going to do.
Okay, great, thank you.
So just wrapping this up, I think the brainstorming phase was a big success. Looking at, all the commentary that's come in and the great discussions on the Slack channel, really, really pleased with everybody who's done that. Yes, there is a link from the wiki to the Slack channel. Let me know if you can't find it. But I think we've learned a lot and we've had a lot of great discussions. But there's a lot of debates that are still active and unresolved. And I think, again, the Slack channel is going to continue to be open for any kind of commentary and discussion. But we have some work to do, and I'm going to try to focus the team around this. So as such, over the next 2 weeks, the idea is to move from the 0.1 list, which was really just a work that I put together over a weekend. So it's not sacrosanct. And move to the 0.5 list, which is the first iteration that will be a work driven by the team here. And so I'm envisioning 2 one-week sprints by the team here. One I'm calling the generative phase, get it? Where we're going to generate a bunch of ideas. And then we're going to drive commentary and selection with the idea of about 2 weeks out, publishing 0.5 and getting the group together again to discuss and prepare for the next phase. So the first sprint is something that everyone should think about participating in. And my ask to everyone is, if you have not yet, please go review the charter and mock press releases. Again, those are freshly edited and just up on the wiki as of last night. Review the resource links and the brainstorming comments and commentary. All that stuff's up on the wiki. It was put there to be durable, so that everybody can review it, even if you haven't been participating up to now. Please go review all that and catch up, and that way you'll see what others are thinking. Then the idea is we are going to start to generate a new version of the list. And to that end, I've gone into the GitHub and I've created a new directory and I've seeded it with a couple files. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. But basically these files are a template to create a new vulnerability type. These are based very closely off a standard top 10 entry. Honestly, I just fed a top 10 entry from the web top 10 list, the classic Big Daddy top 10 list. I fed it to GPT-4 and said, please make a template out of this and put it in Markdown. So nothing fancy, but I'll show it to you. Download the template, fill it in, and upload it back to the directory. And do that as many times as you want. One per vulnerability type that you are suggesting we include on the list. So let me show you what this looks like in practice. Oh, actually, I made slides. Hold on, we'll do it that way. And then I will go show you live on the site. But if you go to the GitHub repository, which is the OWASP, then really long name there, the www project, there is a 0 under 5 under vulns directory. It has 2 files in it, underscore instructions.markdown and underscore template.markdown. The instructions here are pretty simple. Go ahead and copy the template, populate the template as you see fit. And it's really up to you whether you want to be short, whether you want to be super verbose. That's up to you. I'd encourage you to look at some of the other top 10 lists and what level of detail they go into for those, just as a guide, because that is one of the great advantages that we have, is that we get to kind of learn from the success of the OWASP top 10 program and take the good pieces of that. And it is a sort of a well understood format, and we're going to stay pretty close to that. So go ahead and populate the template, save your work, create a new file name, which is your name underscore what you want to call the vulnerability. Put it in Markdown and re-upload your file back to the directory. Anything you upload with a unique file name, just go ahead and do a pull request. I'll go in at least once a day and commit them all and make sure that they're available for everyone else to see. So again, feel free to create as many of them as you like, but please keep it to 1 vulnerability per file, because I think we're going to want to do some post-processing on them. Here is what the template looks like. If you're familiar with other OWASP top 10s, this should look really, really familiar to you. But go ahead and tag it with your name, just so, again, we can kind of keep track of who wrote what, so we can discuss it if people have questions. But after that, put in your description, 1 or more examples of the vulnerability, 1 or more steps on how to prevent the vulnerability, and 1 or more scenarios under which you could see these things, you could see attacks occurring. Below, you can also put reference links, and kind of fell off the bottom of the slide here, but there's also I added an extra field for author commentary. So if you want to explain to the rest of the expert group something about the way you're approaching it, or something about why you've selected it or named it, go ahead and add as much commentary as you want. That way other people in the group reviewing it can see exactly what you're thinking. So any questions on this? The idea is to go through here and have everybody start to contribute, hopefully 1 or more vulnerabilities and vulnerability types into the system over the next week. So questions, comments, suggestions? Going once, twice. All right.
Hey,
Go ahead.
sorry, Steve. And we're talking about vulnerabilities. Like, are we actually just talking about vulnerabilities in general against the top 10, or just like, is it kind of a free for all with vulnerabilities? Or sorry if I missed that.
No, let me back up again for some of the people who haven't been in all of the discussions, and there've been a number of places we've been having these. So let me outline some of the thinking. The idea here is that the form of these, from kind of a template perspective, is going to follow the general top 10 formula. But the idea here is to come up with either vulnerabilities that are unique to developing with large language models, or perhaps ones that share a lot in common with other vulnerability types that may, for example, be on the general top 10 list, but come up with the specific spin on them related to using large language models. And I'll give some examples here that have been hot topics. Certainly the vulnerability type that's been the most hashed out on the list so far to the point where we're still debating, a lot of people are debating what to call it, whether to call it this, but is prompt injection. And obviously injection attacks are at the top of every top 10 list forever. So yes, we're rehashing a topic that is in the general top 10 list, but I think we all agree that prompt injection is a very specific LLM vulnerability that we want to talk about. What are the examples? What do you need to worry about? How are you going to prevent that from affecting the security of your app? There may be other ones, and we've seen a lot of discussion of, proper use of authorization, sandboxing, limiting of privileges. All of those things are things that will occur in any application that you need to be aware of, but there may be very specific considerations for LLM development teams. And if you do go look at the charter document, one of the main reasons that we put that together is it does outline the intent here in terms of what are we doing? How does this relate to other top 10 lists? So go ahead and review those. But does that help answer the question?
It does, thanks. Yeah, because I don't know if I'm sure there is some like public disclosures of bug bounty reports that maybe we could also link as well, or kind of refer to if they're been exploited in the wild.
Yeah,
I know what you mean. It's not like we're not actually performing a POC, because that would be through a bug bounty and under regulation and stuff. But this is kind of more like a conceptual heuristic kind of view, I guess, is what we're
yeah.
referring to.
I would strongly encourage people. If you look at the reference links here, one of the things that I put those down there intending that you might link to would be references to actual attacks or vulnerabilities that people have seen in the wild. Anything that you can reference that is some other kind of information that supports this being important, please include that in the links, because otherwise it is just a mental exercise, and we're all smart. But when we get down to trying to whittle down the list to just 10, it's going to be easy to select the ones that have seen public exploits and things like that. So please include those in the reference links. I think that's great.
Sweet. Thank you very much. And sorry, I don't know if you're going to get to this, but you're probably going to get a ton for prompt injection, prompt hacking, jailbreaking, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I assume there's going to be some kind of mass filter.
Yes, we're about to get there. So you've
okay, cool. Right. Sorry,
set this
I'll
up.
stop then.
But nope, that's okay. Let me see. All right, so now we're going to talk about Sprint 2. So again, I'm asking everyone, please participate in Sprint 1. And I do envision that we're going to get multiple submissions that are often similar, but I think that's how we're going to find the people who are finding the best ways of talking about these. And we then may select one that's the best or mash them up. But for Sprint 2, this is around down selecting. And so Sprint 1 is purely generative. Come up with your ideas, upload them. They may be overlapping, duplicative. Don't worry about it. Put your best spin on it. Sprint 2, I am going to collect up a smaller group to help sift through and review these, to help group them and categorize them. I have a short list that I've made so far of people who've been really active on the Slack or otherwise on the wiki, who I'm going to ask if they would like to volunteer. If you would like to volunteer for this phase and to be part of the group that's going to have to sift through all of this, just go ahead and DM me on Slack, and we can talk about it and what's involved. But I'll be sending out an invite to some people over the next 2-3 days. But the idea is to go through, hopefully, what are a lot of submissions about different ways to look at different vulnerability types. We're then going to take a group off, have some discussion on the different pieces that are submitted. By the way, I'll make sure I'll set up an area where people are able to just comment on any of these, either using the Slack, or I might enable the discussion feature on the GitHub repo. I'll have to think about the best way to do that, but everyone is going to be welcome to comment on what gets submitted. But we're going to have a smaller group go ahead, down select this, and try to create this 0.5 version of the list. Honestly, I envision this first version of of the list, may even include more than 10 things. If we have a lot of really good candidates, we may have a top 15 or top 20 list. But the idea then is to wrap that up by June 30th and put that back out for comment to the full team. And going back to the roadmap, then there would be a couple weeks of commentary where everybody would get to comment on the list, make suggestions, we'd spin it again, and really then there's kind of a full month moving towards 0.9. So any questions on that? Okay. So along the cadence that we've been having, the next meeting will be about in 2 weeks. I'm going to try to get that scheduled in the next day or two. I will add that to the wiki. There is a tab for meetings. I will post the recording and slides for this meeting, hopefully later today there. And then in the next day or so, I will get scheduled the next meeting, and I will post the time and the Zoom link for that meeting. So just let me go back and highlight really briefly here what I'm going to ask everyone to do, and I will post some more information on this and make sure that everybody gets it. But the goal here is over the next 2 weeks to move from 0.1 to 0.5. We're going to have these 2 sprints. One of them is around generating the ideas for vulnerabilities and how we're going to talk about them. And one of them is around sort of commenting on them. And then we're going to have this group go ahead and do some down selection towards publishing this intermediate state that I'm calling 0.5. So really the immediate call to action is for sprint 1. Please go review the materials that are out there. Then go ahead and download the template and upload 1 or more of your takes on the vulnerability types that are out there. You can feel free to copy and paste off the 0.1 list and start from there and modify, or just build it from scratch. It's totally up to you. So with that, I'll open up for discussion, either questions on this or general things that people want to discuss around moving the project forward. So we have a somewhat smaller group than last time. So I'd say just go ahead and come off mute if you have a comment.
Hey, I'm looking at the brainstorming area and looking at the numbers of items that are the vulnerabilities. So specifically like LLM 03 on the top part where it says top 10 lists for LLMs is hallucination. And then on the detailed pages, it's inadequate sandboxing. So if we're writing vulnerabilities, which list and number are we going off of here?
So unfortunately, I think some people went and edited the base document rather than commenting in the brainstorming area. So maybe I'll go and look at trying to do some repairs. But I would say at this point, don't worry about the numbering in the 0.1 document. And you're not going to have to provide a number when you go to submit a vulnerability type. So if you want to do a vulnerability that is similar to one of those, just call it whatever you want and go ahead and upload it with your name and whatever you want to call the vulnerability.
Okay.
Great question. Thank you. Anybody else questions?
May I suggest we use something like tags, and then we use those tags as like, I don't want to use the word, but buzzwords. So going back to like prompt injection, prompt hacking, jailbreaking, like, is it possible we could do like a tagging system that may make it easier to do the actual like stage 2 filtering as well, right?
I'm very open to the idea, and I'm really open to anything that's going to make it easier to filter. Say more about what you're thinking, and maybe let's see if we can adopt it.
Sure. So I'm just thinking like a tagging system, right? So like, or labeling of these. So like your label would be like your AKA. So like if I'm doing like prompt injection, I call the title prompt injection or something, but then I can add like tags, labels, some kind of metadata, which I label it as prompt injection, prompt hacking, jailbreaking, stuff like that. And then obviously for me, then from my submission, I'm able to get the point across more what I'm referring to. But then also for stage 2, you guys could. Oh, sorry. Hopefully, I want to be a part of that. But then you can kind of be like, okay, well, we have 100 submissions, which are these 3 tags, and then it kind of helps whittle that down.
So basically, just create a tag field, say it's optional, but if people want to basically put in hashtags or something in there, then it. Hey, if you want to,
I would personally make it mandatory. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
I would make it mandatory, because then I think otherwise the filtering is going to be really unscalable and it's going to be really laborious, crappy work. Sorry to cuss.
No, I look, I like the idea. If you want to go ahead and just go into the template file and suggest a change in there, I'll do a quick review on it today and we'll push it up and make it part of the template.
Cool. All right, thanks. I will do that now. Yeah, I'll take care of that. Thanks, Steve.
Just sort of put the instructions right there in the template so people know what to do with it.
Sounds cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Great idea. Anybody else?
Hey, yeah. So there was some chatter in the Slack around what is and isn't like the definition of a vulnerability. I know that people had a lot of varying opinions. Did we narrow that down at all?
By the way, super awesome question. And I'm going to say from a really formal perspective, no. I think we had a lot of great discussion around it. But really one of the things I was trying to do was encourage people to stay in kind of a positive brainstorming mode. And there were a lot of suggestions about what to not include on the list. And I didn't think we were there yet. And I really think the next week is going to be more proposing, generating. So go ahead and take whatever view you want of what a vulnerability is. I think there's going to be a lot of hot debates about that. But to me, some of the guidance that we came up with is, an inherent property of large language models probably is not a vulnerability. It's the way large language models work. But if you think about what the actual sort of danger associated with, and you think about what is the active productive guidance that we could give to a development team in terms of how to be safe in that environment and be secure, I think that's the key thing. So, when we talk about hallucination, it's a thing large language models do. It's not, in my opinion, necessarily a security vulnerability by itself. So I think we kind of want to be specific around what about vulnerability is what about hallucination do we need to think about in terms of security, and what is the, say, fixed guidance and things that we would give to people related to it. And that's why I think during this next week, we'll get a lot of these very concrete examples where we don't just get a one-liner description that's hard to argue about. We'll get really clear examples where we can see it in the context of a top 10 list. So just summarizing, I think we haven't locked down a hard and fast definition of what a vulnerability is. And I would like to see a lot submitted over the next week, because that's going to help us really get the debate very concrete. Does that help?
Yeah, it's great.
All
Thank
right,
you.
cool. Anybody else? All right, team. Well, I have a rule: meetings don't go on longer than they need to go on. And I'm sure everybody's got a day job they're supposed to be at. But I just want to thank everybody who managed to make it live today. I know these are really challenging, especially when you do have a real job that you have to get to. And I want to thank everybody who's contributed online, because it is amazing to see, these hundreds of Slack messages, all these contributions, resources, commentary, brainstorming. It's really great. So if everybody can put in some time over the next week, get some of those ideas in, then I think we're going to be in great shape. So I will be posting some more follow-up in the Slack over the next 24 hours, I'll be posting the recording and the slides. And I will look forward to seeing you all over the next couple weeks as we move towards version 0.5 of the list. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Have a good one.
Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.